In working with districts and parents and students of our school communities throughout San Mateo County, we really have been hearing the call for more parent engagement, more family engagement, particularly around any area relating to student social and emotional health. So we do have a Spanish interpreter and named Rosie. She wants to wave really quick. And there she is. And when Mr. Drazin starts his presentation, there will be a slide indicating how you can log on over to here's the Spanish translation, if that helps. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker tonight over the next couple sessions. And over the last year, I and other members of the Safe and Supportive Schools team at San Mateo County Office of Education have had the opportunity to work with Sam Drazin and Changing Perspectives. As we continue to assess the current needs of our schools and families in San Mateo County, it's evident that social emotional learning and well-being is at the top of everyone's list. Sam Drazin is a former classroom educator and a national presenter in the area of social emotional learning. He has worked in several California just county offices of education. I put the example in there, and is the founder and executive director of Changing Perspectives. We're pleased to be partnering with him on this parent program series, and I'll hand it over to Mr. Drazin.
Thanks, Mary, for the introduction. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening to join us tonight. I am going to switch over to the slideshow, so just bear with me one moment as I pull that up on the screen. So as Mary said, this presentation is being simultaneously broadcast in Spanish. The screen right now that you're looking at has directions on how you can access the Spanish channel if you'd like to hear tonight's presentation in Spanish. So I'm really excited to be here with you all this evening to really talk about and unpack what is social emotional learning. As Mary said, this is part one of a two-part series. And I know that many of you, when you filled out your registration form, noted that you're really looking for strategies as parents and caregivers to supporting the social and emotional well-being of your children. We're going to do much more of that in the second part. This part is really going to focus on making sure we have some common language and understanding about really what concepts, skills make up social emotional learning in its entirety. Since tonight's presentation is all about social emotional learning, and since we need to recognize that the world we're living in right now is extremely complex, there's a lot of distractions, there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of trauma, I want to take just a few moments to do a quick breathing exercise to get us settled and get us into a place to really start to absorb this content. I know that some of you might be in the car right now driving places. Some of you might have just gotten home from picking up kids or finishing up work. And so in the spirit of social emotional well-being, in the spirit of feeling emotionally regulated, I want to just take a few moments here and acknowledge everything that's happening in our world and take some deep breaths and really get to a place where we can put all those distractions aside and really get to a place where we can be together this evening and have this really valuable conversation. So the exercise that I want to lead us in is actually something you could do with your kids. If you are not driving, if you are stationary, I'd like you to just hold up one hand with 5 fingers. And if you're on the camera, you can show me that you're doing this. I want you to take your index finger from your other hand and place it at the bottom of your thumb. And as we run our finger up our thumb, we're going to breathe in. And then as we run our finger down, we're going to breathe out. And we're just going to repeat that 4 times for 4 deep breaths. Thank you. And that's a really great exercise that you can do with your kids if they're feeling escalated. It's a way to just take 5 silent moments for some deep breathing. So a little bit more about me to piggyback off of Mary's introduction. As Mary said, I'm a former elementary educator. I taught 3rd grade and 5th grade for a number of years, as well as worked with some students in the special education class in a variety of schools. I present at a national level, both in person and now virtually, to parents, to teachers, to students. And I'm also the executive director and founder of an educational nonprofit organization called Changing Perspectives. I put my email on the screen, and you can also find me on these social media platforms. I really hope that this is not the end of our conversation together, but rather the beginning. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me through email or social media. If you want to have more of a conversation after tonight, if there's something that I share that really resonates with you, if there are additional resources you're looking for, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'll actually have Mary just throw my email in the chat right now so everybody has that. A little bit more about Changing Perspectives. We are a 501c3 educational nonprofit organization, and my organization partners with schools and districts and county offices of ed to promote social emotional learning, to help schools and districts cultivate more inclusive and equitable learning communities. We do that through offering schools access to curriculum resources. We do professional development trainings to teachers, and then parent programs like the one you see tonight. If you'd like to learn more about the organization, the website is on the screen here. We're always looking to partner with other schools and organizations. As Mary said, San Mateo County Office of Ed and Changing Perspectives have been in conversation for probably about a year now, if I'm not mistaken. And during those conversations, we've really kind of tried to find the alignment between what are the initiatives, what are the goals, what are the challenges that San Mateo County Office of Ed is looking to overcome, and how can Changing Perspectives be a proactive partner in supporting that work. So Changing Perspectives is now a endorsed SEL provider to any school within San Mateo County, meaning that we could provide social emotional learning curriculum and support. That includes professional development and ongoing educator support. And then in addition, we decided that given kind of the need and interest within the parent community, that doing a series of parent programs like this one tonight would be a good way to start. So just want to recognize and thank Mary and others at San Mateo County Office of Ed for their continued collaboration and conversation. We're really excited we can kick off that work this evening. So without further ado, let's get into tonight's topic. What is social emotional learning? Or as we know in the education world, educators love acronyms. So the acronym for social emotional learning is SEL. I really hope that tonight I can provide you with some context, some common language, and hopefully maybe shift your perspective a little bit on what you might assume or think social emotional learning is. I think oftentimes when we consider SEL, we immediately think of things like empathy, kindness, anti-bullying. And that's kind of the depth of what we think. Or I know some people might be thinking, oh, SEL, that's like kumbaya by the fire. Like that's just all the fluff. And what I hope I can prove to you tonight is that SEL is not fluff. And that SEL is a very, very deep set of skills that students need, not just in grade school and high school, but for their whole life to live successful lives. So up here on the screen, I have a definition that I really like for what is SEL. SEL is a set of transferable, universal skills that we use throughout our entire lives. And what I like about this definition that has a couple words that are really, really important. First of all, transferable, meaning that the social emotional learning skills that students learn, let's say in their classroom, they can transfer and apply those skills in the cafeteria, on the playground, on the school bus, at home, in the neighborhood, on the soccer field. These skills are universal, meaning that these skills are not skills that they just use in kindergarten, but these are skills that they're going to use in first grade, second grade, third grade, skills they're going to use post high school, skills they're going to use post college, skills they're going to use in their adult life. So you'll see on the screen here, I've put together a collection of photographs to hopefully represent this sense of universality of these social emotional learning skills. So why are we hearing about SEL now more than ever before? There's a couple reasons. One, students and adults alike are navigating an incredibly complex world right now. We have a global pandemic, we've got racial injustice, we've got political divide, we've got economic challenges, you name it, it's happening somewhere in our world. And even if we think that our students aren't aware of these complexities, they are. Those complexities they can access on their phone, even if they're seeing little snippets of them on Instagram or Snapchat or other social media platforms. So our kids are trying to figure out what is happening in this world. They might be feeling a lot of inner turmoil, and they might not have the language to express it, and they might not have the emotional regulation skills to regulate themselves. We also know that all students have experienced trauma over the last 18 months. All adults have experienced some trauma. Everybody's daily routine has been disrupted in some way. It's really important that we acknowledge that as adults, we need SEL, just as our kids do. That our schools have changed in their kind of systems and regulations and structures to keep students safe. And the way that we access information and exchange ideas, like doing a lot more virtual work that we had done in the past, has changed as well. So there's a whole host of reasons why you're most likely hearing about social emotional learning now more than ever before, because of what's happening in our communities. So we know that our students are feeling anxious. Some are feeling isolated and lonely from their peers. Some students are feeling really frustrated. They're just not sure why things are a certain way. Some students are just feeling sad. They might be grieving loss of people, grieving loss of opportunity or quote unquote normal experiences. And some of our students are feeling really confused. So as we embark on this work in understanding social emotional learning and supporting the social emotional well-being of our students, we really need to take a step back, really take that bird's eye view and acknowledge all of the feelings, many of which are negative, that our students are experiencing during these times. I really hope that this workshop, as well as the next one, gives you tools and strategies, resources, and language where you can first and foremost support and help your child in their social emotional learning journey and social emotional well-being. That you can use these resources, ideas, and knowledge to help yourself in your own journey, and then ultimately help your entire community. So what I'd like to do now is share with you just a short 2-minute video of teachers that I've worked with over the last year that have implemented Changing Perspectives, SEL curriculum and resources in their school sites, just so you can hear a little bit more from teachers about not just the value of changing perspectives in their school, but also the value of social emotional learning.
I think without changing perspectives, my students may not have gotten the full roundabout support for their social emotional well-being. It's just so important and so helpful for our students. And they really, really enjoy it.
The students found that the activities are really engaging, they're fun, they're short, but they're also really interactive.
You know, we're doing some really meaningful tasks with our kids and having these really meaningful conversations that we're seeing are transferring into their day-to-day lives.
It's just been such a simple and effective resource for our teachers. I mean, there's been so much put on their plate. So to think that you could add one more thing felt a little bit nerve-wracking, but this was not one more thing. This was like adding to the plate instead of what was on the plate. It's the first program that we've ever worked with that really keeps educators in mind when they built the resource platform. So the accessibility, the way that it's organized, the simplicity of the lessons makes it so doable.
So what makes the Changing Perspectives curriculum unique for us is that it was really visually based. There were a lot of supports that came with the program.
I've just found everything to be on point for 5-year-olds, 9-year-olds. The website is great. It's just really flawlessly laid out.
I can pick and choose the lessons that are applicable to what's happening in the classroom. Changing Perspectives gives enough of not a script, but enough of like telling you what to say, what to use for language, but also giving you enough of that ability to make it yours.
I think this is just such a valuable tool because it's just a library, a very simple, clear library for teachers or any educator to access to bring this content to kids regularly in a simple way that can be just embedded in their everyday.
So I've told you a little bit about me. I've told you a little about what is social emotional learning, the set of transferable universal skills. We've talked a little bit about why this work is so valuable now more than ever before. Before I jump into really the unpacking, if you will, of the social emotional competencies, as we call them, I just wanted to share 3 other highlights here of reasons why social emotional learning is so vital for lifelong success of students. And as I share this in the chat, we're going to drop some links in to other resources that you might be interested in exploring on your own. So studies have continuously shown that social and emotional learning leads to improved academic outcomes for students, as well as improved behavior of students. Social emotional learning benefits are long-term and global, meaning one of the things that they've seen is that when we invest in SEL with our students when they're young, that their success of high school graduation, their success of post-secondary education are much higher. And lastly, social emotional learning skills help to improve lifetime outcomes. Over time, the studies have shown that students who have a strong social emotional competence do much better in life. So now that I've told you about me, I've laid the description of what the definition of what social emotional learning is, and I've given you some reasons why this is important. Hopefully you all agree in the value of this work. So what is social emotional learning? Let's actually talk about what it actually is now. And as I go through this, feel free to drop any questions or thoughts or comments in the chat, and we will have some time at the end for Q&A as well. Social emotional learning is a very broad, deep set of these universal, transferable, lifelong skills that students need. CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, It's a national nonprofit based in Chicago, and they're really the leaders when it comes to research based evidence and policy and advocacy around SEL. And they've come up with 5 competencies that they believe build a strong foundation for social emotional learning and social emotional well-being. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And these are the same 5 competencies that many, many schools are basing their social emotional learning off of, the same 5 competencies that the California Department of Education is basing their SEL work around, the same 5 competencies that the Changing Perspectives curriculum is aligned to. So these are really kind of a really great baseline for understanding social emotional learning. What I'd like to do is go through a little process where I unpack each of these competencies to help us all understand what is the depth, what are the skills and the concepts within each of these buckets. And the way that I like to illustrate it is when you go to a hotel and you take your suitcase and you put it on the couch or the luggage holder and you unzip it and you take your stuff out. I want you to imagine that each of these competencies, each of these boxes on the screen is a suitcase. And what I'm going to go through over the next few slides is taking that suitcase of self-awareness, for example, plopping it on that luggage holder, unzipping it, and seeing what's in there. So let's get started with our first piece of luggage, which is self-awareness. So we're going to take that suitcase, we're going to plop it on the luggage holder, we're going to unzip it, and let's talk about what is in self-awareness. When I think about helping our students develop an understanding of the self-awareness competency, I like to think about helping our students identify adjectives and nouns to describe who they are. It's about giving your kids the opportunity to reflect on their strengths and challenges and recognize that our strengths and challenges vary by environment. Your child's strengths and challenges on the soccer field might be very different than the way they get along with their brothers or sisters, which might be very different than math class in school. So it's about thinking about what are all of our strengths and challenges, how do they change over time, and how do they relate to the different parts of our lives? Within self-awareness, we're also helping our students think about the ability to identify their emotions, be able to recognize how they're feeling and why they're feeling it. So in other words, students who have a strong ability to identify emotions would be able to say, I am feeling blank, fill in the emotion, scared, excited, happy, anxious, because of blank, fill in what's happening around them that's making them feel that way. Self-awareness also includes the concept of growth mindset. Growth mindset is the opposite of a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset means that we believe our capabilities have a ceiling or a cap. So a fixed mindset might be, oh, I'm not even going to try to memorize my 6 times tables because I know I'm only going to get through 5 times. Right? Our kids are already saying that they know they can't achieve more than the 5 times tables. A growth mindset is the opposite of that, acknowledging that we can always overcome those challenges that we've already identified. And lastly, within self-awareness, it's about recognizing our sense of identity and purpose. Who am I in the world? What is my purpose in the various communities that I'm a part of? When we think about identity, one of the ways I like to help students illustrate it is thinking about our identity as a puzzle. We have all these little pieces that make up our identity puzzle. and helping students think about, well, what are the pieces that make up your identity puzzle? It could be gender, it could be personality traits, it could be interests, it could be religion, it could be language. All of those things make up our identity, and also be aware that our children's sense of identity and sense of purpose is going to change throughout their lives, right? Their sense of identity in 7th grade is probably different than it was in 2nd grade, and is most likely going to be different than it is in 12th grade. So when we think about self-awareness, we're really thinking about what are those nouns and adjectives to help our students recognize who they are in the world, their emotions, and their strengths and challenges. On the other side of the screen, we have competency number 2. So I'm gonna take that luggage and I'm putting that up here and unzipping it. And that's self-management. When I think about self-management, I think about helping students come up with the verbs to take what they know about themselves and self-awareness and put them into behavioral action. So self-management is all about action and verb. So one of the things we're helping students do within self-management is helping students manage and regulate their emotions. So in self-awareness, they can say, this is how I'm feeling and why. But the next step of that is, well, what do I do with that emotion, right? Especially when I'm feeling maybe really escalated and I'm feeling a big emotion. What are strategies that I can use to keep my heart and my body and the hearts and bodies of those around me safe? One things that I really like to do is think about providing students with a strategy, or excuse me, an array of strategies that they can use. Give your kids a menu, give them a buffet, and then let them choose what strategies are going to be helpful for them. For some kids, doing that breathing exercise that we started with might be helpful. For other kids, that might be too passive, and maybe they need to do some push-ups and use big muscles. For other kids, maybe they need to, plug in and listen to some meditative music on their iPhone or iPad, right? So there's so many different strategies. And we're going to talk a lot more about these strategies in the next session. Self-management is also about helping our students think about intrinsic motivation, self-discipline, how they plan their lives, how do they manage their time, how they organize their after-school events, making sure they have the self-discipline to get their homework done or their chores done, and you have to figure out what system is going to work best for your kids. Sometimes a token economy system, it's called. It's like a positive behavior intervention system can work really well. Self-management is also about goal setting. And I think sometimes when we think about goal setting, we think of it as having to be a really, really big goal, but recognize that goals could be a daily goal that our kids are trying to achieve, a weekly goal, a monthly goal. And the way I like to illustrate goals for kids is a staircase, right? So we draw a staircase. At the very top, we put what's that goal you're trying to achieve. And then on each step leading up to the top, we put the little steps you need to take to get there. So for example, as adults, let's say buying a house might be a goal, right? So buying a house is at the top. But what are the things you have to do to get there? Well, you have to save up a down payment. Well, you've got to get pre-approved by a lender. And then you've got to work with a realtor. And then you've got to, have an inspection, right? So there's all these things that get there. So to recap, when we're talking about self-management, it's all about working with our kids to take what we know about them, their strengths, their challenges, their emotions, and put it in a verb or action form to be in control of their emotions, control of their stress, and be able to have goals and be motivated for lifelong success. Now, the first two suitcases are all about the self, right? It's in the word, self-awareness and self-management. When we get to the third suitcase, the third competency, we are now talking about broadening that lens and helping students become more aware of their social surroundings. Hence the name of the competency, social awareness. So to unpack social awareness, that's where we're helping students develop the skills around empathy. Empathy is all about feeling with another person, being able to understand how other people experience the world. Oftentimes, as we were told as kids, it's putting yourself in someone else's shoes. There's a great resource called the Empathy Museum that you might want to check out if you're really interested in empathy. And also Brene Brown has a really great short YouTube video called Empathy versus Sympathy, which is also another good resource which really unpacks empathy into key components. Within social awareness, we're also helping our students develop a sense of perspective taking. How can you understand the perspective of someone else, especially when it's different from you? And I don't know about you, but even as adults, I think that could be a really, really challenging skill to fully understand and be able to demonstrate in a consistent way. Now, when we get to the following two, showing concern for others and expressing gratitude, those really have two parts. So let's talk about showing concern for others first. In order for a student or a young child to be able to show concern for others, they need to first have the observational skills to be able to look around an environment and read the cues of when someone might need some concern shown to them. So helping kids recognize, how do you know when someone's feeling a little down? Is it their body language? Is it their facial expressions? Is it what they're saying and how they're saying it? So that's step one, right? Step two is then providing our kids with the strategies and the ideas for how they can then approach someone and show concern. How do you approach them with your body? What do you say? How do you say it? So there's a couple steps to that if we really break it down. Expressing gratitude is also the same, especially in the world we live in, right? Like Amazon Prime, instant gratification, right? You can kind of lose track of what we feel grateful for sometimes. So again, in order to express gratitude, you first need to reflect on, well, what am I grateful for? Who has helped to provide those things to me, right? That's part one. And then part two is, then how do I show them that I am grateful for what they've done? Understanding diverse social norms means helping students understand that the behavioral expectations or social norms vary by environment. So by that, I mean the expectations we might have for our kids for eating dinner at home might be different than the expectations we have for our kids when we go out to a nice restaurant for dinner. In school, we see this throughout the school day, right? The expectations for how you can behave on the playground are very different than in the library, which is different than in the cafeteria, which is different than in the classroom, right? And that can be hard for some kids to recognize and understand. Well, I was able to do this here. Why can't I do it here? Especially as we're coming back to more in-person learning and in-person experiences, that's been a really hard adjustment for a lot of kids to make. And the last piece in social awareness is this idea of considering various cultural backgrounds. That's all about, recognizing and valuing diversity. That's about accepting different cultures and backgrounds. So I just want to pause here. We're 3 out of the 5 suitcases unpacked. And hopefully by now, you are starting to understand and recognize what I meant when I said earlier that within each of these competencies, there is a large depth of these skills, these concepts that are universal and transferable. All right. So again, if you have questions, comments, throw them in the chat. We've got 2 more competencies to go, and then we're going to open it up to a discussion. All right. So the next competency here is relationship skills. So we're going to take that suitcase, put it up here, unzip it. Within relationship skills, we're helping our students develop the skills to create and maintain healthy relationships. Recognizing that relationships could mean a variety of things, from friends to romantic relationships, to relationships with family members, relationships with colleagues. But it's all about how can we ensure that A, our students understand what is a healthy relationship, and B, what are the skills and what do you need to do to create and maintain those? Another key component of relationship skills is this idea of effective communication. And I think oftentimes when we hear that, we immediately assume, oh, it's like how our kids talk to each other, how our kids talk to me. And it's actually so much more than that, right? It's not just how we talk, it's the words we say, it's how we say it, it's our body language. We also need to recognize that in the year 2021, our kids can communicate in 12.5 different ways. So it could be how they communicate through social media, how they communicate through texting, how they communicate through TikTok videos, how they communicate when they have their headsets on and they're on their Xbox and they're talking that way. So really being aware and mindful that when we're supporting our kids in developing effective communication skills, it is so much broader than just how we talk to each other. It's how we interact in all of the ways we communicate in the year 2021. We also are looking for ways to support our students in becoming team players and problem solvers. We know that in today's global world, many jobs require communication. They require collaboration with others on a team. And so the more that we can start to develop these skills for our children when they're younger, the more successful they'll be in those collaborative roles as they grow up. Leadership skills. Every kid has the potential to be a leader, but not every kid is a leader in the same way. And not every kid is a leader in the same environment. Your child might be a leader on the basketball court, but might not be a leader in reading class, right? So recognizing that we all have leadership qualities inside of us, but it's about tapping into those and figuring out what environment we can rise and be a leader. It looks like the picture cut off this last one, but it says asking for support when needed and offering help to others. So again, this one is twofold. It's about recognizing when there's things you need help with and learning to be a self-advocate and asking for that help. And simultaneously, it's about recognizing what do I have that I can offer others and how can I use my strengths to help others. So again, relationship skills, again, there's a lot there. We've got communication, we have teamwork, problem solving, leadership, self-advocacy, supporting others, being in healthy relationships. Whoa, all right. You almost did it. Round of applause. You almost made it to the end here. So the last and fifth competency I want to talk about is the idea of responsible decision-making. Responsible decision-making is all about supporting our children in recognizing what are the ethical, moral, and safety impacts of their decisions. It's about really working and taking the time to work through with our kids decisions that they're grappling with and recognizing that making decisions is something we do our whole lives. And actually, as we get older, the consequences usually become a little higher, the risk factor. So it's about helping our students weigh the pros and cons of a given decision that they have. It's all about, and this could be really hard for some kids, and if there's any middle school parents on this call, they might be able to relate to this, right? Helping students be able to predict the consequences of their decision before they make their decision could be very challenging for some of our kiddos. It's also about being able to evaluate that when we make a decision, it doesn't just impact us, but it also impacts a certain community. So helping our students think about what are not only the pros and cons to a decision, but what are the pros and cons and the impacts for ourselves and those around us. And lastly, it kind of all boils down to this idea of critical thinking skills. So I know that was a lot to listen to, and I applaud you for sticking with me through this, but I think it's really, really important that before we talk about other strategies or anything else around SEL, that we all understand what we are talking about when we're talking about SEL. I also think that having this language will help you as parents better communicate with the school, because now you know if your child is struggling with perspective taking, you could be asking your child's teacher or your child's school counselor, well, what are you doing around social awareness? If you know your child is really struggling with identifying their emotions, you know to ask the school about self-awareness, right? So now you know some of these terms that you can use. A lot of these terms are also terms that schools are using with their kids. So again, you can use these terms with your child and they should understand what you're talking about. The value in common language is great, and it's right here. So as a recap, we talked about self-awareness, I'm moving around the circle here, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. The 5 competencies that make up SEL, with a whole host of those skills and concepts within each one. So before I stop the screen share, we open this up to a discussion. I just want you to mark your calendars for our next training. And Mary will put the link in the chat as well for November 17th, 5:30 p.m. We'll be on Zoom. And that's really going to be where I'm going to share specific strategies that you can use to support your kids within each of these competencies.